Welcome to episode 95 of Rebirth Revolution. My name is Melissa Olson. This week, I want to touch on a couple of news items that caught my eye and tie them into a spiritual concept that we haven't really talked about. The subject of this week is humility. What is humility? The dictionary describes it as freedom from pride or arrogance, the quality or state of being humble, a modest opinion or estimate of one's own importance or rank. Freedom from pride and arrogance sounds like a nice place to be, but then they list the following words as synonyms: abasement, which is to be lowered in status or esteem, lowliness, meekness, non-resistance, passivity, self-abasement, submissiveness, timidity, inferiority complex. The initial definition sounds good, but then the synonyms make it sound dreadful. The synonyms are in no way aspirational. There is another related word that is also problematic: humiliation. Humiliation is the abasement of pride, which creates mortification and being reduced to lowliness and submission. It is a forced decrease in social status. Humiliation is also intertwined with shame and embarrassment. Wow, not very appealing. But I feel like these words are part of the trap we find ourselves in. The one where it seems like a losing proposition to be humble. I saw a clip of the basketball player Giannis Antetokounmpo. When asked how he was able to keep his ego in check at such a young age, he explained that when you focus on the past, that is your ego. When you focus on the future, that is your pride. When you focus on the present, that is humility. He explained that bragging about what you have done is ego, bragging about what you are going to do is pride, but being in the moment without either of the two is where he finds he is the most successful. Such a brilliant and simple concept, and this from a successful young man who our culture would fully support in being full of ego and pride based on his accomplishments. He recognizes that his truest power is found in the present. His power is in his humility. He makes it sound like a warm and safe space. This strategy of his will be put to the test as he is being wildly and widely celebrated for his amazing skills. How much more could we all bring to the game if we could quit time traveling, quit obsessing about what was, quit obsessing about what will be, and just bring all of that energy to the present and allow it to play out as it will? The trap that we are in is that our culture promotes the myth that we are supposed to be constant winners. We are supposed to be the best. We are measured by our wins and losses. Losses make you a loser, which is probably the worst thing you can call someone. But simple math tells us that there have to be way more people who lose than there are those who win, or are considered the best. The culture tells us that we might be better if we were more ego-driven, more prideful. We should all be out there tooting our own horns, promoting ourselves as brands, so that everyone can see just how spectacular we are. We want them to know that we are winners. If we are winners, they will raise our level of social status. There was a time when people lived in small groups, and the social status within that group was something manageable and even instructive. But now the entire world is our social group. It means little to be the best at something in your small group. It doesn't even mean much to be the best in the large city. Now you are supposed to be concerned about your social status in the world. How insane is that notion? Ego and pride want you to get overly invested in wins and losses, and they want you to calculate your personal value based on those outcomes. The true test of your value is how you are able to hold on to your principles when you face a challenge, whether you win or lose. That is your value. It is not calculated by the money you make or the fame that you acquire. It is about your adherence to your own principles. Your job is to keep trying, keep going, and keep demonstrating your spiritual principles as they apply to your challenges, whether that challenge ends in a win or a loss. And the easiest way to stay out of your ego and pride is to stay in the moment. That is where your humility exists. To stay in your humility loses you nothing at all, except for that nagging feeling that you aren't enough, you don't have enough, or that people don't hold you in high enough esteem. The esteem that matters the most is the esteem you hold for yourself, and you can do that without comparing yourself to the rest of the world, a comparison that can only make you feel less than. What if you are already enough? What if you already have enough? What if it doesn't matter what the general public thinks of you? What would that free up for you? The thought patterns that keep you locked in the grips of your ego and pride are ones that you bought into. You also have the option of opting out of those thought patterns. It may feel like ego and pride are the accelerants that keep you striving for more, but if that is true, you will never feel successful because there is no end to that ride. You will never have enough, be enough, or have enough people who think you are the greatest. And you are likely to lose your way in terms of adhering to your principles. This brings me to another story in the news this week. The continuing saga of the mega pastor, Joel Osteen, from Houston, Texas. Here is a man who is reported to have a net worth of somewhere in the vicinity of $100 million. Since his wealth is accumulated through a church, it is not taxed. That sounds like a lot of money, but it wasn't enough to get his operation through the pandemic without needing a $4.4 million PPP loan, which he will not have to pay back. Joel was in the news this week because he is now driving a $325,000 Ferrari. This is added to his palatial estate and private plane, among other spoils of the work he does. He preaches prosperity gospel, which basically says that God gives great riches to the most devout Christians, though you only need to look around to see that that doesn't really hold up. The donation of one's money is a very large part of this philosophy, which is working out very well for Joel. It wasn't that long ago that we were all able to watch in real time on Twitter as Joel made excuses for why his megachurch in Houston couldn't take in those affected by a hurricane. His excuses were met with photo evidence from people on Twitter who basically shamed him into dropping the excuse and making a plan to help out. Twitter can be a real cesspool, but in this moment, it was real-life accountability that was necessary and pretty glorious to watch unfold. Joel is a second-generation preacher in a church that is estimated to bring in $43 million a year. In 2018, their budget revealed that they spent $1.2 million in mission and outreach. In contrast, they spent $31.7 million on weekly services and $11.9 million on fundraising. I believe the reason that stories like this are cropping up and people are getting rightfully upset by them is that we are in the stage of the rebirth when all curtains must be pulled back, all must be exposed, all charlatans must be revealed. Full transparency is required for healing. It may seem like it's not that big a deal that one guy has figured out how to game the system, talking people into giving their hard-earned money, paying no taxes on church income, while being first in line for government handouts. But the tragedy here is that the people who have made him wealthy are doing so at great expense to themselves. And all they get in return is a promise that this guy can hook them up with their creator, which is not something anyone can do or needs to do. Everyone already has their own direct line. They don't need Joel to get in touch. And as they are asked to give more and more to strengthen that connection and possibly become as wealthy as Joel in the process, the giver's financial situations get more and more dire. It's kind of amazing, this pattern of some ruthless people who are at the lower levels of spiritual awareness, selling the idea that if those without resources only give everything they can to those who already have cornered most of the resources, then they too will magically become wealthy. I don't know, the math just doesn't add up. Every single soul, after each lifetime, will review their own performance in this school. They will sit with their team of advisors and decide how it all went and what still needs to be done. This is where it is decided what level of spiritual awareness you have achieved. It will also be used to chart out your path moving forward. If there are lessons you did not learn, you will choose a path that will teach you that lesson. If you were a con man in this life, you will be conned in the next. Considering the fact that Joel will not be able to take his earthly possessions with him, it may be a rough go-around the next time. Karma, as they say, is a bitch. And I don't know all the ways that our choices are judged, but I would have to imagine that using the Creator in your con is a particularly egregious offense. So, back to humility. If we stay out of ego and pride, we stay out of the loop of artificially inflating our importance in comparison to other people, which also frees us of that constant comparison. If we stay out of the loop of artificial inflation, we can then skip the next inevitable step, which is the part where we decide that we are garbage because we didn't live up to the artificial hype that we predictably could not live up to. Every time you decide that you should live up to any sort of external validation, you are leaving yourself in the most vulnerable position possible. The outside world is more than a little fickle. Do you really want them to calculate your value? And the ego and pride that convinces you that you are deserving of all sorts of external praise and adulation is what precipitates the downfall. If you are doing what you do with the expectation that others will lift your social status, and that move will shift the core of your being to a place of higher self-esteem, you will always be let down. Pay close attention to the stories of those who have taken this ride. They will tell you, if they are honest, that it didn't fix anything about them. It changed the circumstances that surrounded them and created new lessons, but it didn't, in and of itself, fix what was broken. Healing what is broken is always an inside job. You can't get there from the outside in. You can't fix it with money or fame or adulation. In fact, money, fame, and adulation can make it much more difficult to heal oneself. External validation can distort the picture and make it harder for you to see the truth and for others to tell you the truth. Money, fame, and adulation keep you firmly in the grasp of your ego and pride, which is not the sweet spot. Anytime you hear someone telling you how great they are or their work is, you know they are not working in the sweet spot of humility. They are not doing the best work that they can because they're still tangled up in the past with their ego and in the future with their pride. They are still beholden to external gratification, which keeps them from being the best they can be. No true genius, working at their optimal level, is going to spend their precious time trying to convince anyone that they are a genius. They will just keep their head down and do the work. They will not muddy the waters with the need for praise and adulation. That is not the genius way. Your healing and optimal space for growth is more easily found in the space of your humility. A beautiful example of humility was found in a letter that my father wrote to his parents back in World War II. He had been awarded both the bronze and silver medals. In a letter to his parents about receiving the medals, he wrote, "I hesitated a long time to tell you this because I figured that since it is considered unusual for a man to have 2 medals, you would get the wrong opinion. I figured you would think that I am a reckless, wild man, but that absolutely is not the case. I don't get foolish and try to make myself a hero. On the other hand, it isn't in me to quit in the rough spots." And this is beautiful because it is void of traces of ego or pride. He isn't asking for affirmation that his status is elevated. He isn't bragging about himself. He is telling his worried parents that he is simply keeping his head down and doing the job at hand, and that they don't have to worry that his motivations lie elsewhere. He is not weak. He is not passive. He is not timid. He is not submissive. He is humble. Thanks for returning for another week of Rebirth Revolution. It's interesting to me how stories of the day seem to have a common thread. This is how the revolution works. You can always contact me by emailing rebirthrev@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. We can be found on all the podcast apps, along with on Audible, Spotify, and Pandora. Full episodes play on YouTube as well. Until next week, examine your motivations for doing what you do. Ask for the help you need. Get vaccinated if you haven't already. And stay humble. Remember, you are loved exactly as much as every other person on the planet, not 1 ounce more or 1 ounce less. Stay strong and safe and aligned with your principles.